All right. Hi, everyone. I am so excited because today I have someone that is very special, someone that I refer a lot of the people that I see to and that I've seen myself. Courtnie Massey, who is a clinical therapist located in Easton, Maryland. She is also a Reiki practitioner, and she does offer telehealth sessions for anyone in Maryland who is looking for a therapist. And she does Reiki for everyone, all over, outside of Maryland as well. And recently, Courtnie, you started your own private practice called Be Well Holistic Healing and Mental Health, located in Easton, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm Courtnie Massey. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, clinical therapist, and my colleague Sasha Whiting and I had a dream to start our own practice and it to be sort of a holistic approach to mental health and healing. And we believe that it's kind of a full circle when it comes to healing. So yeah, we started Be Well Holistic Healing and Mental Health in downtown Easton, and we're really proud of it. Yeah, so I am just here to kind of give some tips for how to get through the holidays, because as Lauren mentioned, the holidays can be really tough for people that are grieving.
Yeah. So why is it, Courtnie? Like, why is it so hard for why are the holidays particularly difficult for?
I think a few reasons. I think that people are reminded, about family and friends and coming together and being together, because that's so much of what we do at the holidays. So if you've lost such a special person in your life that you were so used to spending the holidays with and having traditions with and just seeing and being around and being happy with this person, the holidays can be really tough if that person's not there. And I think another thing that we kind of forget about is the holidays, people seem so cheery, right? You're always looking around and seeing people so happy and just going about their days and enjoying the holidays. And if you don't feel that way, it can be really tough to see other people feeling that way. Right. And it can kind of bring up some like bitterness and just feelings that aren't pleasant to feel.
Right. That makes sense. So in those moments, and I deal with people in kind of in a different way on the other side of it. And that's why I think it's so special too, that I can refer people to you, because I'm not a therapist, and there are a lot of people who need that, who I do see, or who I connect with their loved ones, and I can refer them to you. But when I see those people who are struggling to get out of bed in the morning, who can't speak, when they lost a child or they lost someone that is so close to them, where would you recommend that they even begin? Like, when you see someone like that in your work, where do you recommend that they begin?
Yeah. So I really just tell them that however they are feeling is okay. Like, just first take the pressure off yourself to feel any certain way. However you wake up in the morning and you feel, then, don't judge yourself. Don't place judgment on your feelings. Really just allow yourself to feel however you're feeling. Because if you don't and you push it to the side, and that feeling's not going anywhere. The healing's not occurring because you're not allowing yourself to feel. And as hard and terrible and dark as those feelings can be, I think you really just need to sit with them first before, kind of putting pressure on yourself to feel better. And that's something one of my clients has told me is one thing that she's found really helpful with me being in therapy with me was, I was probably the one person in her life that told her not to just get over it and get better. I think she had a lot of people in her life saying, like, if you just moved on, you'd feel so much better. She's like, I'm not there yet. And it was so helpful to just hear, like, it's okay. It's okay. You don't have to feel better right now.
Right. And grief doesn't seem to ever end, right?
Yeah.
It's not
No,
something
it doesn't. It
that
doesn't.
ends. So someone can still be grieving, or the holidays can still be hard for them 25 years later.
Absolutely. Yeah. I know. I think of it sometimes as so if you envision like a box and then like a circle being inside a box, and the circle is so big at first and there's not much space around the circle to feel good, like those white spots around the circle. But, with time, the ball might get a little smaller, but it's never disappearing. There's always going to be that big, heavy knot of grief in your body, in your life, and how you're feeling. It's always there. And holidays specifically, like holidays, anniversaries, birthdays, things like that, are always going to make that ball get a little bouncy, and you're going to feel you're going to feel some stuff come up for sure.
Totally. So that it's like becomes a trigger in some ways. And so like what you're saying is that it's okay, even if it's 30 years later, you're still feeling that way during the holidays, or you're still feeling that way out of the blue. Like just feel it, feel
Yeah,
emotion.
absolutely. Yeah. Feel it.
Love
For
that.
sure. Yeah. So I think just not putting pressure on yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where it starts.
Not putting pressure on yourself. That's it. And that's actually a great tip that you had given me as well, is when I'm like feeling something physical in my body, like feel
Yeah.
into that feeling. Don't run away from that,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? And I
It's
love that.
uncomfortable. Yeah. So the natural, thought or feeling is to run away from it because it doesn't feel good. Why would you want to sit with that? So it
Right.
takes a lot of work to really sit with it. Yeah.
And then it's able to like lighten up a little bit, or it's like, hey, I can do that. That's okay. You know,
Yeah.
it's okay what I am feeling, or and not to run. I love that.
Mhm.
So for anyone who is walking through the holidays that is, struggling, like mental health wise,
Yeah.
as well, and grieving wise, what tools have you found helpful
Yeah.
um, that you can share with those people?
Yeah. So a couple tips kind of on how to get through the holidays if you're grieving, whether your grief is very fresh or if your grief is something that you've been dealing with for years and years. It doesn't matter. Like I said, don't put pressure on yourself. So if you are, a part of a big family, like I am, there's so many events going on. There's so many things happening, so many parties, so many things that you feel like you need to be a part of because that's what you've always done. So especially if this is the first year that you're dealing with this grief at the holidays, don't put pressure on yourself to attend all of those parties. Like it's okay. You don't have to go to this. You don't have to go to that. If you're not feeling up to it the morning of, you don't have to go. And if you do decide to go, which I give you major kudos for, drive by yourself, drive yourself there. So if you get there and you're overwhelmed and you don't want to be there, you can leave. You're not stuck. You're not ever feeling like you have to do something that you don't want to do. And same with decorating for holidays. I remember one of my clients, the first holiday after her husband passed, she was like, I didn't put up the Christmas tree. I didn't decorate. I just didn't feel up to it. And that's okay. Like that is totally fine. And if you don't want to go Christmas shopping, you don't want to go to the mall, order things online. If you still want to buy people gifts, just take care of yourself and don't put pressure on yourself to do the things like you used to do. You don't have to be perfect. You are allowed to feel crappy. You're allowed to feel sad. You're allowed to do things like you usually wouldn't do, So that's one. And another thing, like kind of like what we mentioned, it's okay to feel all the feelings, like everything that comes in. You're allowed to be happy one minute if your mom is opening up a gift that you got her that you were really excited about. And then the next minute, you're seeing a sappy holiday commercial that reminds you of your husband that passed away. You're allowed to feel happy and sad in the same minute. Like it's okay. And that's what grief is. Grief is it's not linear. You're never going to be on this perfect journey to getting better with grief. It's going to go up and down, especially like I said, around the holidays or anniversaries or birthdays. And I think another important thing to mention is kids during the holidays. Kids, the holidays are for kids, right? That's what it's all about, is seeing kids see that Christmas magic and the all of the magical things that go with Christmas. So I think kind of talking to your kids if they're dealing with grief, that they're allowed to enjoy the holidays. Like you don't have to feel guilty for being sad because dad's not here this year. Like enjoy it as much as you can. Because it's still magical and it's still something that you should enjoy as a kid, and it shouldn't be tainted, by grief. But if they're feeling sad, then they're also allowed to feel however they're feeling. But I think sometimes kids can, unknowingly put some stress on themselves with that, like feeling like they're not allowed to do something. So just having that open communication with kids, if you have kids that are dealing with grief. And then another thing is remember that everyone grieves differently. So if you're, at a holiday party and you're feeling really sad and you're looking over and you're seeing a family member that you feel should be dealing with the same amount of grief as you, and they don't look sad, everyone handles emotions and grief different. So they might be really hurting. And this is how they make themselves feel better in the moment, is to be happy and try to enjoy the moment, to not feel like bitter about, other people's happiness. So I really invite people that are feeling that bitter feeling to lean into gratitude and to really lean into like what they are grateful for around the holidays. It might be really hard to find it, but really reach and really see anything you can find to be grateful for, because that kind of counteracts that like negative feeling of bitterness. It can help with that. So those are a few things that I would tell people that are going through the holidays dealing with grief.
I love that. I love that. And, someone said something to me a while ago, which I loved, is when they were feeling, jealous or resentful towards someone else, they were really just wanting what they have.
Absolutely.
Just wanting what they have. And I was like, wow, what a beautiful statement is when you're feeling like, why does that person have that? And whatever. Really what those feelings are is just like, hey, this is what I want. I want that.
Yeah.
I want to have that family together, and I don't have that here. So it's acknowledging that and acknowledging that that's, I loved that someone said that it was a big aha moment for me, and I became more aware of my own thoughts.
Absolutely.
When I was like, oh, I would love that.
That's what I was going to say. It's like how, reflective of that person to really like look at that emotion. Because, jealousy and bitterness it's just like kind of like that secondary emotion, kind of like anger. It's like really looking at the root cause of why do I feel jealous and why do I, envy what that person has. So it's very self-reflective for sure.
Right. And it's always like looked at as a bad thing when really it's just telling you something, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. And I love that gratitude connection because, little by little, it allows you to appreciate your life now, how it is, or, and for me in my work, what I've learned through spirit that's connected is a lot of times the way when people honor their loved ones during the holidays, like they find different ways to honor them and different
absolutely.
close.
Yeah.
Have you seen your clients, do that? Have
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a big one. That is a really big one. So if you have a tradition that this person was usually a part of, finding a new tradition to honor that person and doing it every year. I think of like my own grandma and my grandfather's passed, and how she used to do things. She does things just a little different because he's not here. And it's kind of like created some new traditions, which is awesome. And we're all like, looking at it like from like a new, fresh, positive standpoint than to kind of be sad and, miss him on the holidays. It's just honoring him.
Right. I heard someone say that like they just couldn't do the holidays. They couldn't do it. They just like couldn't bear it. So they turned on like all of the Planet of the Apes or something. I've never seen that, but they've turned on all of them. I guess there's a ton of them. And that's what they did the whole entire Christmas.
Yeah.
And that's how they got through. And you know what? That was okay. Like that, that's whatever you need to do to get through is big. And I've learned through spirit is they tell me like in every single reading that like they love when they honor them and they love when they do it that makes them happy. Yesterday I had a reading where someone was so fully into grief and her son stepped forward and was like, it's okay that you want to go away for Thanksgiving. He acknowledged that she couldn't even do it. She had to get away somewhere completely different and just ignore the holiday.
Absolutely. Yeah. Starting something different and doing something different can feel really good for people that are going through grief in the holidays. Absolutely. Yeah, it's a big one. I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah.
Love that tip. And you know what? This year we kind of have to do that anyways.
Yeah, it's true.
We have to do that anyways and find our own joy in that different kind of year, in that different kind of holiday and connections that we're making, right? We have to find a different way to connect, a different way to get through, and anxiety, dear Lord, like I've struggled with anxiety a lot in my life, but it hasn't been so bad once I started mediumship. It kind of like, I was able to release it. But this year, especially right before all this happened, I was having all these dreams about, 9/11 and shootings and all these like horrific dreams, knowing something was coming and having that anxiety, but not knowing what it was. And then here it comes. And then there's a whole other kind of anxiety, right? That I think that many of us are feeling. So like, do you have any tips for someone who is going through anxiety or who may be experiencing it as we do go through the winter season and the holidays?
Yeah. Seasonal affective disorder is huge. And I think like, kind of like people just like brush it off like, yeah, it's just this time of year that it's getting darker earlier. And it's just kind of like what it is. So I think, you know, you don't have to feel like it is what it is. You know, you can do things to make it better. One thing I will say, like, I feel like people, like, especially during the holidays, can tend to lean towards alcohol too. So I would say, like, not to do that. Like, remind yourself, like, that can only make things worse. And so just kind of like staying present. And if you're feeling anxiety and around the holidays, or just because it's 2020, like we said, sit with that feeling and just really like feel where it feels in your body, where you're noticing it in your body. A lot of people will say their chest or their belly. And so like really just placing your hand on your chest can give you kind of like a consoling, kind of like grounding feeling, but just staying present with where the anxiety is in your body and where it's coming from, and really sitting with it and not brushing it to the side and using something like alcohol to mask the feeling of anxiety. One thing that I tell a lot of my clients who struggle with the daylight, you know, how it gets dark super early, is to get like sun lamps and just sit in front of that sun lamp, you know, for like a half an hour a day, just to get that UV that they're missing. Crystal, Himalayan salt lamps. I can literally tell all my clients to get like a bunch of them and just keep them around the house, because it's just like pretty light, like just to give off. And I don't know, just little things that you can do around in your environment to make it not feel so like dark and gloomy can bring up your vibe a lot.
That's a really good tip. I love that.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that. And there is, and I think a lot of it too is like finding that little bits of joy, like that little tiny bits of joy. Just like you said, like maybe that sun lamp does help you here, or the Himalayan salt lamps, or whatever it may be. But like finding that little bit of joy, like to get you to that next moment, like a little bit.
Yeah, I know. And I was surprised. One of my clients, I told her about the salt lamp, and she put it right next to her bed, and she said, I just love it. I fall asleep and I feel that like glow and that pink light, and it just feels really happy and really calming. So I'm like, it's very simple, you know, $15-$20, but if it can help you, then, you know, go for it.
Whatever it is. And I recently am one of those people that put up our Christmas tree early.
Oh, so did I.
And you know what? It makes me really happy. For me, that's something that brings me joy. I like turning it on. I like this, even though it's not Thanksgiving quite yet. It makes me happy. And that's during the 2020, that's what we have to do. What is something that makes you happy? And actually for, to connect with your own loved ones, the higher vibe you are, the easier it is for you to connect to your loved ones. So doing those things that bring you joy, I found, helps you to even better connect to your loved ones. Because I can't be at a low vibration in order to connect with them. So for me, just if someone is looking to connect with their own loved ones or feel them closer, the more that you do things that make you happy, the closer or the easier it is for them to connect with you or to come through.
Yeah, that's really true. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
So I do want to ask, I'm just curious myself. So as a clinical therapist, what are some lessons that you've learned in this work?
Yeah. So as far as grief goes, I will say that I've heard some pretty horrific things that people have said to clients that, are going through grief. And like, I will ask my clients sometimes, like, I think I asked one of my clients who's in the throes of grief right now. And I said, has anyone said anything to you that's been remotely helpful? And she said, she thought about it for a second, and she was like, honestly, no. Like, there's not really much that anyone can say that makes me feel better. So what I've learned is that I think people feel very uncomfortable when they're around someone who's so heavily, in the throes of grief, that they don't know what to say, or if it's a traumatic grief experience, like a suicide or a death of a child or something very, very hard. They don't know what to say. So they just kind of have word vomit. So some things that you should not say to someone who's grieving, I would say things like, well, it was their time, or it's just for the better, or things like, just stop being so sad. If you just got up and moved and did something, you'd feel much better. Kind of like rushing them through the grief. So those are some things that my clients have told me that really were heart-wrenching things to hear, and things that really were hurtful. So, you know, just for like everyone, just some tips on like how to be with people that are grieving is just be sometimes, like just sit with them, just offer like a hand on their leg, or you know, if it's like a little kid or something, like just like a consoling hug. You don't have to say anything, you know, because like my client said, a lot of times it's not helpful. So just not saying anything and just being present and saying things like, you're allowed to feel however you want to feel right now, or it's okay to cry, or, you know, things like just that are reassuring to them that they don't need to feel any certain way right now, and they can just do whatever they want to do because they're just so in that like heavy feeling of grief. And then, you know, showing up for them, I think is really important. One of my clients has been going through grief for 3 years. And, you know, she said in the beginning, everyone was there, you know, everyone was around, they were calling, they were bringing dinner by, they were, you know, at the funeral, they were sending cards, sending flowers, all the things. And then, you know, a couple months go by and she's lonely and nobody's there and nobody's around and nobody's showing up. So, you know, just like being that person that continuously shows up and being that person that sends a text or a call, like checking in. I'm going to bring you coffee, and not just saying like, I'm going to bring you coffee, saying I'll bring you coffee on Monday at 10 a.m., you know, like just so they can expect it. And you're kind of like holding yourself accountable to be there for that person. But I think those are like probably the biggest lessons that I've learned with grief and helping my clients go through grief. And another thing, you know, I think everybody should kind of know about grief is kind of the stages of grief and what, you know, we go through when we're grieving. So in the beginning, it can look a lot like numbness or shock, and you're not really in touch with what happened because you can't believe what happened. And then it kind of transitions into like bargaining. So kind of going back and saying, well, if I did this then maybe it wouldn't happen. Or if I could just go back and change this, then I would give this up, things like that. And then of course, anger, feeling intense anger, which can usually lead into depression, which is the phase that I feel lasts the longest and is the most continuous. And then acceptance and kind of healing. But like I said, grief is not linear. It can go back and forth. And a lot of times you don't go back to that shock. I mean, I guess you could, but usually, like I said, it's the anger, depression phases that you kind of circle back and forth with. It can last for, like you said, like 30 years, people can still be feeling this grief, especially if it's something that's so traumatic. And I think I told you about my training in trauma and how I use a lot of my trauma training when I'm dealing with people or when I'm helping people that are dealing with grief, because a lot of times if they're here, it was a traumatic grief experience. It wasn't, you know, a death of not to say that a death of a grandparent is not traumatic. It can be very traumatic depending on the person, but it's an expected death. You expect your grandparent to pass before you. You can kind of prepare yourself for that from an early age. Right. When it's a death of a child or a spouse, like that, you know, it's just a different type of grief. So I think I lean a lot on my trauma training when it comes to helping those clients too.
That makes a lot of sense. And that is so helpful for me, you know, me to hear as well. And because you really don't know what to say sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's such a beautiful point and powerful point, is you don't need to say anything. Just show up and be there for them. You know, one question I have is when someone, you know, is saying or is pushing you away or wanting to isolate themselves, you know, I guess as a friend or someone that cares, do we, you know, we want to respect their process here and respect what they want.
Yeah.
But then, you know, I guess being specific, like you said, would be very helpful. Being like, okay, you can, you know, you don't have to go out, you know, you don't have to, you know, hang out with me tonight, or I won't bring over a movie, but on Monday, I'm going to just drop by and just going to leave a coffee at the front door or something.
Exactly.
So being specific and
being specific and not invading their privacy. You know, if they want to be alone and they don't want to watch a movie with you, then respect that, but still check in, still send a text, you know, still drop off little things here and there, things, you know, they love. Like, I think just remembering that in their grief, it's so heavy, but they are still noticing that you were that person that continuously showed up and continuously, you know, checked in on them and brought them things and things like that. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing all of your knowledge with us. I know that it will be helpful for some of us who are going through the holidays and who may be struggling here. So I just want to thank you. Thank you for being
Of
here.
course. I'm glad I could help.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.